Intergovernmental Affairs Committee is called to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Branscombe.
Here.
Representative Decker.
Present.
Representative Gooch. Representative Herron. Representative Hodgson.
Here.
Representative Imes.
Here.
Representative Cook.
Here.
Representative Derek Lewis. Representative Scott Lewis.
Here.
Representative Moser. Representative Raymond. Representative Swan.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Here.
Representative Callaway. Representative Bratcher.
Here. We do have a quorum. I'd like to remind the members to shut down your phone, like I always have to remind myself. Would any member like to recognize special guests? Representative Cook.
Thanks, Chairman Bratcher. I think they really like your committee because they've come back on Thursday again. I've got a group from Bourbon Middle School with me today, a page from Bourbon Elementary. So welcome everybody. My wife's out there among them too. So thank you guys for coming up. We're going to have a big day at the Capitol.
Thank you guys for being here. Let's give them a hand for being here. Thank you guys. Anybody else? First item on the agenda is House Bill 302. It does have a committee sub. And Representative Decker, Representative Rachel Roberts, and Representative Josh Branscombe. I just introduced you, but introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Representative Jennifer Decker from District 58. Thank you.
Representative Rachel Roberts, District 67.
Representative Josh Branscombe, District 83.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm just introduce myself, and I'm here today to speak about House Bill 302, of which I am the primary sponsor. With me are the representatives who are co-sponsors of the bill, and they were just identified. There is a proposed committee sub that I make a motion to put before the committee.
Committee sub has been called. We got a motion and a second. The committee sub is before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If all in favor, vote aye. Aye. Any opposed? Now the committee sub is before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee sub seeks to address several crucial aspects of our election process. For those of you, are there new people here, not on this committee? As you all know, in the past two legislative sessions, Representative Branscombe, Representative Tipton, and I have passed House Bill 564 and House Bill 574, both of which modernized our election process and received praise from around the nation as having had bipartisan support, with provisions to help increase turnout at the polls and having increased the security of our election system. The bill before us today has some language that clarifies the intent of our prior bills, corrects some unintended consequences, and expands the efforts to make Kentucky's elections fair and transparent. If you will permit me, I will go through each change individually. First, Representative Rachel Roberts' bill drafted a section that directs the Office of the Attorney General to establish a uniform procedure and timelines when conducting independent election inquiries in the various counties. This provision aims to ensure accountability, give internal controls to ensure each audit is performed and how it is performed and the process. Additionally, it directs the Office of Attorney General to issue regulations to designate what forms are to be used, and it will what will be requested of the county, the types of forms, making it uniform. The second change this bill makes is in regards to the plans county boards of elections make for the proposed elections that are upcoming, and that goes to the State Board of Elections and Secretary of State prior to each election season to ensure that the plan will be secured and adequate. This change in this bill simply added that county boards of elections must include how many parking spots are available at proposed voting centers to be part of that application. This was added so that the counties and the State Board of Elections, the Secretary of State, may better ensure voter access on Election Day at each polling site. The third provision of House Bill 302 prevents election officers from campaigning at polling places while the polls are open on both Election Day and the days in-person absentee voting is conducted. This stipulation regarding Election Day is already in the statute, but with in-person absentee balloting, voting now being an option, it simply adds that those days are the same rules for electioneering at the polls. The aim of this provision is to ensure fairness and impartiality in the election process by prohibiting election officers from engaging in partisan activities while acting in their official capacities. Fourth, the current statute states that no electioneering may take place within 100 feet of the entrance to the polling location. This bill would change that to 100 feet of the property line of the polling station. This change is designed to prevent instances of voter intimidation on the driveways and in the parking lots. Not all parking lots are owned by the same entities that own the buildings where the voting takes place, and this bill will stipulate that the county boards of elections may designate parking areas that would be free of this electioneering. The fifth change in the bill is another area of unintended oversight from last year's bill. This change would prevent any person from electioneering where and while election officer training is being conducted. This ensures that election officers will receive unbiased training which does not have outside political influences. The sixth provision of the bill is in regard to eligibility in general elections. Currently, a candidate who has lost a primary election is not eligible to be a candidate for the same office in the general election of that same year. This prevents losing candidates from running as write-in candidates later in the process. The current statute has, however, unintentionally failed to take into consideration cases in which a candidate who has won the primary withdraws from the race. The language in the sub corrects that so that if there's a vacancy, the political party with the responsibility of with the responsibility of replacing candidates may opt to select a person who lost in the primary. The seventh change deals with replacement of candidates. This clarifies that if a candidate withdraws or is removed from the ballot after the primary, but before 10 days prior to the certification of candidates, the candidate may be replaced on the ballot. This removes any confusion as to when a candidate may be replaced. The eighth change is the bill makes it a Class D felony if a convicted felon votes or attempts to vote knowing they do not have voting rights as a felon. This closes a loophole in the law and was brought to our attention by the Office of Attorney General, who said the AG has no statutory vehicle without this new statute to prosecute an individual who attempted to vote knowing they had lost the right. The ninth provision of the legislation is in regards to approving the expenses by the Kentucky Registry of Election Finance. It simply adds that fees for legal services in matters before the Legislative Ethics Commission to be valid campaign expenses, assuming and only when the final adjudication is in favor of the candidates. As we know in these divisive times, some of the complaints that have and will be filed are frivolous and filed for mere political purposes. The ninth charge is in regard to financial reports for county political parties. Currently, county political parties must file reports semi-annually. This bill would make it where a county which does not have more than $10,000 in their account would only have to file reports on an annual basis. The aim with this is to reduce the burden of reporting requirements for the very small counties while still ensuring transparency. Finally, the 11th change of the bill states that if a candidate closes his or her campaign account and opts to donate remaining funds to a recognized 501c3 charitable organization, that charity cannot be one in which the candidate benefits personally, financially. In conclusion, the proposed committee sub for House Bill 302 seeks to improve the integrity, accessibility, and fairness of our election process. I appreciate your attention and consideration of this legislation, and we're ready for any questions you might have. Except that I would like to ask if my colleagues have any comments.
Yeah, I was wondering if
I'm sorry, confused.
Representative Roberts, could you expound on why the change in the audit?
Certainly. So this is yet another tool we have to ensure that the public feels secure in our election process. So all we're doing here is making sure that the Attorney General is clear with the clerk's offices that will be conducting his inquiry as to what is expected of them. And then the other part of this is that the clerks had requested that they get the results back so that they can either find places that they may need to address, or more likely and more consistently, they can make sure that they share that information with the public so the public is even further convinced and assured of the security of our elections.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow members. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, and I want to commend Representative Decker and Roberts on their work and leadership on this bill. You know, the past 2 years we've made fairly extensive and sweeping election reform here in Kentucky, and I think we're heading in the right direction. This bill is not as expansive as what we've seen in the past. It does address some concerns and challenges and some suggestions that have been brought up. I think you'll notice that there's really nothing in the bill that will have a huge impact on our county clerks or the State Board of Election, and that's important that we allow the clerks and the State Board to implement these past 2 years of election reform that we've had and essentially kind of let them catch their breath a little bit. We're going to keep taking incremental steps to improve on the process, and once again, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and really commend Representative Roberts and Representative Decker on their work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any questions? Representative Moser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for this bill. Thanks for the discussion. I have a quick question. In Section 4, you say that if a candidate who's been defeated in a partisan or nonpartisan primary is ineligible as a write-in candidate,
Yes.
Why is this important?
Because we want to maintain the integrity of our system where the voters choose the candidate that they think will best lead, and we don't want candidates coming back to having lost an election to undercut the person who won.
Well, I understand, I guess, your rationale, but write-in candidates don't generally pull much weight or win elections. So I see this as taking away voter choice, but I don't really see that it's a necessary part of this. And then on the felony, the D felony on somebody who has a felony in their past, I have a question about if, and sorry, I didn't ask if I can ask another question. Thank you. If an individual who has a felony in their past has an expungement and restoration of voting rights through, I don't know where we are on the executive order. Didn't the governor institute some restoration of voting rights? How does this affect that?
On your first point, and then I'll address the second point, there is the thought behind the first, and I think I stated it, but there is a sore loser concept where you don't want the person who beat you to win in the general election, so she will simply take away the votes from that person to ensure that you really didn't lose.
Oh, you're talking about Section 4.
The Section
Okay.
4. I would like to invite the representatives from the Attorney General's office to come up and expound upon what you've asked.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, guys. Just identify yourselves and Representative Moser can reform the question if she don't mind.
Blake Christopher with the Attorney General's office. I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Rita Zakaria with the Attorney General's office.
Okay. All right. Do you need me to restate the question?
That'd be helpful.
Okay. All right. I just had a question about if an individual who has a felony in their past has their felony expunged, and there's a restoration of voter rights. I guess it would nullify this section of the bill. They would no longer be charged with a felony because it's expunged.
Sure. My understanding is that the language of the current draft, and the bill drafter, Rewa, can correct me if I'm wrong, has a specific carve out, so it will not apply to those who have received the kind of expungement that you're discussing here. I also think, sort of in a big picture context, right, that given the constitutional authority, right, in this area of the governor's realm, I think it would be hard necessarily to craft a statute that could infringe on that, given that the Constitution specifically provides certain executive rights there. But nonetheless, I think the statute has been, this new language has been careful to spell out specifically that it does not infringe on the kind of expungements that you're referencing.
Okay. All right. May I just comment? So administratively, it seems a little onerous to try to figure out who. I guess when an individual registers to vote, they are accepted if they it's not accepted from being able to register if they have a felony. So is that already administratively kind of taken care of, or is this something new that we're putting in place?
So I want to back up a little bit. And this change deals only with those who have already been registered to vote before they were convicted of a felony. And so this wouldn't necessarily impact anyone who's trying to register to vote. So we're talking about a class of folks who were previously registered to vote, lawfully registered to vote, may have voted in the past, and then get convicted of a felony. They're advised that they lose certain rights, including the right to vote, and then they come back and try to vote anyway. That is the fact pattern we have, where right now we think there's a bit of a loophole that doesn't allow our office to prosecute them appropriately. This would just make that fact pattern a Class D felony, which is the same fact pattern if you hadn't been previously registered to vote before you're convicted of that felony. In terms of the administrative side, I'll let my colleagues say a couple of things to that, in the sense that I think they're pretty well alerted, right, when there are expungements or other relative executive orders on file for an individual when they're investigating this kind of activity. We were talking about this before, so I'll let her detail that.
At the Attorney General's office, our Special Prosecutions Unit and our Department of Criminal Investigations gets these cases. And first thing there's any kind of fact scenario like this one, we would look up and see if the person is a convicted felon. We would also look up and see if the person has had their rights restored, if it's been expunged, and if that's the case on any of those situations, that's it. We don't go further with prosecuting. We stop right there. And I believe this bill also has that in there as well.
Okay. All right. I just have a little bit of a problem with tagging people with another felony. Yeah. Okay.
I can give a specific example if you think that would be helpful.
Sure, yeah, and maybe how many people this affects in Kentucky.
So we already have a wrongful registration statute in place, so that's already dealt with. The only thing that this would affect is we just had a case last year where the person was a lawfully registered voter. They then were convicted of a federal offense. They went to prison for that offense. After they got out and before getting their rights restored, they ended up voting twice in 2 separate elections. So still a convicted felon, unlawfully voting, no rights restored. There's no law in place right now that would let us investigate or prosecute a person like that. And so that's kind of the fact scenario. And so we're trying to ensure the integrity of elections in this way, the same way wrongful registration does. This kind of mirrors it, but it's unlawful voting versus unlawful wrongful registration.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Compare that same fact pattern, right, with someone who, if they hadn't been registered to vote prior to the federal felony, it's a Class D felony. So that's the only change in the fact pattern is this person happened to have been registered to vote prior to the felony offense, and as a consequence, we have very little, if anything, we can charge them with. But if that person hadn't been registered to vote previously and the same fact pattern had occurred, it's Class D felony. And we think that's an inappropriate disparity in the law.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think, we're talking about expungement and restoration of voter rights. So, they're opposite ends of the spectrum a little bit, but I understand your position. Thank you.
Do I hear a motion on the bill? Moved by Representative Hodgson,
Second.
seconded by Representative Cook. Any further questions?
May I make one
Yes,
more
ma'am.
comment? I want to thank all the people who are here from our election system. We have professionals here who have dedicated their lives to ensuring the safety of our elections, the integrity, and high voter turnout. They help us with every election bill we offer, and I think that they make it much better when we communicate and collaborate. Also, I want to thank the opposite party of mine, because elections should not be political. And so when we work on these bills, or should not be partisan, I'm sorry, and when we work on this bill, we always try to make them bipartisan, nonpartisan. So I want to thank all the people who work on bills with me in the election system. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Decker. We have a motion and a second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Branscombe.
Aye.
Representative Callaway. Representative Decker.
Yes.
Representative Gooch.
Yes.
Representative Herron. Representative Hodgson.
Aye.
Representative Imes.
Yes.
Representative Cook.
Aye.
Representative Derek Lewis. Representative Scott Lewis.
Yes.
Representative Moser.
Yes.
Representative Raymond. Representative Swan.
Yes.
Representative Weber.
Yes.
Representative Bratcher.
Yes. Motion carries. Motion carries for House Bill. The vote carries for House Bill 302 as amended by the House Committee Substitute and passes with favorable expression. Thank you. And now we have a title amendment on that. Need a motion for the title amendment. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Title amendment passes. All right, we're ready to move on to House Bill 230, represented by Representative Hodgson, sponsored by. Oh, we got the big dogs at the table today, figuratively and theoretically.
We may need a little more space up here, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yeah, men of stature.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I'm John Hodgson, Representative 36. I've asked Trey Grayson to join me, who's a former Secretary of State, former member of the Board of Elections, and is involved with the Clerks Association. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife of election law, so I asked him to keep me straight on our history in particular.
Okay, we have a committee sub.
Motion on the committee sub.
Have a motion and a second. Second. The committee sub is before us for, we need a vote on that. Man, I'm really out of script today. We need a vote on the House Committee sub. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now, the House Committee sub for House Bill 230 is before us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 230 with the committee sub is a fairly simple bill. The genesis of this is the fact that for a number of years, Kentucky has had more registered voters than living human beings above age 18. That's caused a good deal of consternation among the public, some confusion sometimes even in this committee. In addition to that, we've had a federal judge with a consent decree regarding voter registration rolls since about 2019. That's added another layer of intrigue to this process. The National Voter Registration Act provides a framework for removing voters from the rolls, and sometimes that process takes years and is very cumbersome. And I think as we have entered into an era in our society that I would call a trustless society with regards to elections, the general public and even members of this committee have expressed interest and concern in what is the status of our voter roll cleanup. So this bill is intended to provide transparency to the status of that voter roll cleanup. So the first feature would be that the Secretary of State and the Board of Elections would be asked to cooperatively present to this committee or the Interim Joint Committee on Elections a status report detailing all their cleanup activities in the previous quarter, every quarter through the year. So as we don't wait 2 years for an update or a year for an update, we hear on a very frequent basis in detail what has been done. And there are some details in the bill that I lifted from comparisons by the Heritage Foundation with other states about the cleanup activities that they do that are superior to ours. So it's a fairly detailed list on the quantity and quality of those cleanup efforts. In addition, there would be a report produced for the first time that would list every address in the Commonwealth that has a registered voter there and the number of voters that reside at that address. No names, no birthdays, no identifying information of any kind, just 123 Elm Street. There are 3 voters registered there. This report would be made available to everyone in the Commonwealth. In the county of their residence, they could access it at the county clerk's office online, or anyone could access it online. And this gives voters the ability to go look up their own address and see if they have extra people registered there. I found out this was my situation. I had children that moved out of state after college, and they were still registered at my address for years. I didn't know what to do, how to clean that up. A lot of us have encountered on the campaign trail knocking on doors of houses that have two or even 3 families registered at that same address. So this gives people a chance to look up their own address, clean up their own record. They may also look at the vacant lot across the street and find that there's 3 people registered over there and pose a question. So part of the process would be a portal that would be established by the Secretary of State and the Board of Elections website for people to self-report those observances of discrepancies or anomalies in the voter record. Let the Secretary of State's office and the Board of Elections take care of cleanup activities, which might involve postcards and other comparisons. Again, this report would be sorted by county, so every county in the Commonwealth would have a copy of that available at the clerk's office, either by a terminal or, in the case of very small counties, if they don't have an internet connection, you could print out the report, pretty short report. But these are activities that are already being done by the people that are charged with doing that by the law. The relationship between Secretary of State's office and the Board of Elections is not always abundantly clear to the public, and I think this bill would go a long way to ensuring transparency, letting voters participate in the process of keeping their own rolls clean by watching their own address and that in their immediate area, and would help increase the confidence in the public that our voter rolls are being cleaned up and that they are getting better every quarter. So, glad to address any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And is this been tried in other states or anywhere else that you know of?
Other states have varying levels of reporting on their election rolls. There are some states where you can actually have publicly available information on every voter who is registered. We did not want to go that far in this state. I think people don't want their personal information out there. What's my name? What's my address? What's my age? What's my party registration? But this is nothing but the geographic reality that there's an address here in the Commonwealth and there's a registered voter at that location.
Yes, sir.
It's interesting. Trey Grayson, former Secretary of State. Ohio, for example, is one of the states that just puts all the registered voters' name and address online, so people can look at that. And Michigan has a pretty detailed listing of all the procedures that they do as part of their list maintenance program. So I don't know that every state's slightly different, and so I don't know that anybody literally has this exact thing in place. But I think pieces of this are probably in a lot of states.
I will say also, in developing this bill, had the collaboration of the Secretary of State's office, the Clerks Association, and the Board of Elections personnel. So,
got a motion? Second? Let me ask, since we have the, what is it, the Swiss Army knife of
Yes,
elections
that's right.
at the table? Overall, do you think there's, Secretary Grayson, do you think that we're getting, I know there was a dip there for a while, but is confidence growing back in our elections?
I think there is. One of the things that we in Kentucky in the election space, as well as nationally, I think election officials, we've been doing a better job of engaging with the public, engaging with legislators, helping to clarify some of the procedures and rules that are out there. I also think that many of the investigations that have gone on have revealed that our system's pretty good. No system's perfect, but I think we're trying. I appreciate what you and your colleagues have done to bring in clerks in the state board and Secretary of State to your meetings to help answer your questions, because you get asked a lot of questions and this stuff's confusing. You all have to be experts on everything, and particularly because you're probably viewed as more of an expert on election administration. And so for us to be able to help all of you understand the interplay of federal law and state custom is hard. And so, the more opportunities we have during the interim to come in and educate you and your other colleagues, we're happy to do that. But there's a lot more to be done. I think the representative's right. And some of these, like this bill, the bill we just heard, and some stuff that we want to work on in the interim can continue to increase that confidence. One of the challenges is whenever somebody loses an election, the supporters of those candidates or that party always have lower confidence numbers in the outcome just because their person lost. And you've seen that over the years. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that there is that trust. You might not like the outcome, but you trust the outcome.
Great. Yeah. For a free society, self-governed, the elections is the heartbeat. If it's not a free and fair election, we got problems. And I really like Representative Hodgson, how the spirit of this bill is to bring the clerks and the Secretary of State's office and the State Board of Elections together. It's very important that they all work really close together for a common good, and I think they're doing that, and I think this bill helps move that along. So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yeah, we have a motion and a second. Secretary, call the roll.
Representative Branscombe, Representative Callaway, Representative Decker,
Yes.
Representative Gooch,
Yes.
Representative Herron, Representative Hodgson,
Aye.
Representative Imes,
Yes.
Representative Cook,
Yes.
Representative Derek Lewis, Representative Scott Lewis,
Yes.
Representative Moser, Representative Raymond, Representative Swan,
Yes.
Representative Weber, Representative Bratcher.
Yes. So House Bill 230, as amended by committee substitute, passes with favorable expression. Thank you, guys. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Thank you, Mr.
We are adjourned. Huh? Yep. I bought you one for the Marines. You never wear it, though.
He left. He didn't know.
I did, yeah.
Because Raymond didn't show up.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Is it? Who else do they have? Raymond and Heron. Raymond, you're right.